Welcome everyone. On the channel, I use AI to break down big topics like politics without bias or emotion. So then, what's going on right now? Trump throws out the idea of making Canada the 51st state, and then he's talking about buying the Panama Canal, and now he's telling Denmark that they should hand over Greenland because it's necessary. Denmark's prime minister basically said, yeah, that's not gonna happen, but there are whispers from other officials that maybe it's not totally off the table. And if that's not enough, Trump's son heads to Greenland. Trump himself posts phrases like "make Greenland great again," and then he shares some stupid map with Canada as part of the United States. Justin Trudeau then fires back with "there's no chance this will ever happen," and Elon Musk jumps in with "girl, you're not the governor anymore, so it doesn't matter what you say." And there's probably more that's going on as I'm recording this. So then, what the hell is going on? Donald Trump, this was not in your campaign promises. But alright, let's not lose our heads and try to sort the mess out. And here's the plan. I'm going to ask the AI about the actual chances of Greenland, Panama, or Canada becoming part of the United States, figure out what Trump and his team are even thinking, predict where it could go, and maybe even talk about the chances of some kind of crazy expansion war. And by the end, ChatGPT will write a personal message to Donald Trump and tell him what it thinks about these moves. But before we get into all of that, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that bell for notifications so that you never ever miss out on a brand new video, which I publish every single week. Thanks so much, and now let's get into the chat. Alright, so here we are, where I'm asking AI to be unbiased and give clear, short, and straightforward answers. Don't be too polite, no sugarcoating, or anything like that. We're going to start out with Greenland first. I want ChatGPT to explain why exactly Greenland and what the real reasons are behind Trump's interest in the place. Just a quick response, and then I might ask some follow-ups, but for now, here's the first answer. Greenland is all about strategy, resources, and power projection. It's not about the people or their culture, it's about what lies under the ice and where it sits on the map. The US sees Greenland as a geopolitical jackpot. It's rich in rare earth minerals, which are critical for tech and defense industries, and it's perfectly positioned for Arctic dominance, especially as the ice melts and new trade routes open up. Trump's interest? It's part business mindset, part legacy building, and part wanting to assert American dominance. Greenland is like a shiny object that ticks all the boxes for someone thinking in terms of deals and control. But let's be real, this isn't a genuine concern for Greenland's future. It's about resources, military bases, and outmaneuvering rivals like China and Russia in the Arctic. Alright, the reason might make sense, but let's be real, Denmark doesn't seem like they'd go for it. So what about the people there? Does ChatGPT think that Trump would try and take control, or just back off if they refused? And let's see what he says. Denmark absolutely doesn't want to sell Greenland. It's a matter of pride, sovereignty, and maintaining control over an Arctic jewel. Greenland is a self-governing territory under Denmark, so even if Denmark entertained Trump's offer, the people of Greenland would still need to approve it. And let's face it, Greenlanders are not interested in becoming a part of the US. They value their autonomy and have been moving toward full independence from Denmark, not toward swapping one boss for another. As for Trump, he's not the type to just step aside if someone says no. He'll likely turn up the pressure using economic incentives, political deals, or even security concerns, like we need to protect Greenland from Russia or China. If that doesn't work, he could shift strategies and try to drive a wedge between Greenland and Denmark, pushing Greenland toward independence and offering US support in exchange for influence. But let's be real, Trump is all about the optics of a win. If it becomes clear that this isn't going anywhere, he'll probably pivot, blame Denmark or Greenland for being unreasonable, and drop it while framing it as their loss, not his. He's not one to fight a losing battle if it tarnishes his brand. Greenland might just end up as another deal he brags about trying but doesn't actually pull off. Alright, got it. Well, that sounds like a prediction. But now let's see what ChatGPT would do if it were in Trump's shoes. Does it think Trump's idea is the right move or not? And why are we so sure that if the US doesn't act, China or Russia would take control? And here's the answer. If I were in Trump's shoes, I'd see the appeal of wanting Greenland. It's a strategic gold mine. But would I actually pursue it? Probably not, and here's why. While it's loaded with resources and perfectly located for Arctic dominance, the political and cultural blowback isn't worth it. Greenlanders don't want it, Denmark won't sell, and the whole thing would come off as imperialistic, which could isolate the US internationally. Trying to buy a territory like it's the 19th century just doesn't align with how modern geopolitics works. It's more about alliances and soft power, not outright acquisitions. As for the Russia and China angle, it's less about them outright taking control and more about influence creeping in. Russia's military is already active in the Arctic, and China is buying up access to ports and resources all over the world, including in Greenland. If the US doesn't assert itself in the Arctic, there's a legitimate fear that these two countries will dominate the region economically and militarily. It's not about them invading Greenland, but about securing access and partnerships that could shift the balance of power. Is Trump's desire right? It depends on how you define it. Strategically wanting Greenland makes sense. Control over it would give the US a major edge, but morally and diplomatically, it's shaky ground. If you're stepping on people's autonomy or alienating allies like Denmark, you're playing with fire. Greenland is better off as a partner than a property, and the US would be smarter to work with them, not try to buy them outright. Okay, well, let's be clear here. It's probably a bad idea to just leave this region alone and do nothing, right? But yeah, the methods should be completely different. Alright, let's move on to the Panama Canal. For now, let's have ChatGPT briefly explain what's going on there for those of you who don't know, and what it is that Trump wants. And here it is. Trump wants the US to regain control of the Panama Canal. He claims Panama's management is flawed, fees for US ships are unfair, and China has too much influence over the canal. He's floated ideas of using economic pressure or even military action to take it back, framing it as critical for US security and global power. Panama, unsurprisingly, isn't having it. They firmly rejected the idea, calling the canal their inalienable patrimony. Trump's push is less about fairness and more about reasserting US dominance. Alright, so do you think military involvement is possible? Military involvement in Panama is technically possible, but highly unlikely. However, if Trump framed it as protecting US security and countering China, his supporters might rally behind it. Still, the reality remains, it would be a massive misstep. Trump has already worsened relations with Panama just by making these statements, and any escalation would completely destroy US standing in Latin America. The US would look like a bully, and even countries that don't particularly like China would see the US as the bigger threat. Domestically, it would face massive resistance from Congress, the Pentagon, and the public beyond Trump's base. In short, Trump might float the idea to fire up his supporters, but actual military action, it's a bluff. The cost, economically, politically, and diplomatically, would outweigh any perceived benefit. This would be a lose-lose situation for the US if it ever went beyond rhetoric. Alright, ChatGPT thinks it's a bluff, got that one. So maybe it can predict how this situation might play out. Let's ask it how it could all end. Here's the likely outcome. Trump's push for the Panama Canal will fizzle out. Panama isn't going to hand it over. It's a symbol of their sovereignty and independence. The international backlash to any US attempt to strong-arm them, especially with military threats, would be immense. Allies like the EU and even some Latin American countries would rally against the US, framing it as modern imperialism. At best, he might use this as a symbolic move to energize his base, claiming he's fighting for American interests, even if it goes nowhere. At worst, he overplays his hand, strains international relations further, and walks away with nothing, blaming Panama or China for obstructing him. In the end, this story will likely become another bold but empty chapter in Trump's foreign policy playbook. So, ChatGPT, what's your take? Is it the right move? Is it fair? What do you think? It's not the right move, and certainly not justified. The canal is Panama's, and any attempt to reclaim it would disregard their sovereignty and disrupt decades of diplomacy. It would signal to the world that the US is willing to undermine agreements and international norms for its own gain, a message that could alienate allies and embolden rivals. From a strategic standpoint, maintaining access to the canal is important, but that doesn't require ownership. The US would achieve far more by working collaboratively with Panama, respecting their rights, and finding common ground to counter any external influences. Pushing for control is short-sighted and would likely backfire, creating unnecessary tension and harming America's reputation. It's the wrong play, plain and simple. Wrong play. Alright, well, we're done with the Panama Canal, and now let's finally talk about the last one. For now, I'm talking about Canada. But before we move on, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends, leave a comment, or engage in any way that you like. It really helps the channel to grow, and it allows me to keep on making brand new videos every single week. Thanks in advance, and now let's move on to Canada. So let's talk about Trump first. Like, why is he even doing this? What's going through his head when he says that Canada should be the 51st state? And what's the real reason behind these moves? And here's the answer. I think Trump's fixation on Canada is rooted in his obsession with winning big and leaving a legacy that feels historic. To him, annexing Canada might seem like the ultimate power move, gaining vast resources, expanding territory, and solidifying control over the entire continent. It's less about practical governance and more about ego. He likely sees Canada as a logical extension of the US because of cultural similarities and economic ties. And he probably underestimates how fiercely Canadians value their independence. The idea also ties into his worldview of dominance. If Canada were part of the US, it would eliminate the need to deal with a neighboring country as an equal, which fits his tendency to sideline diplomacy. Honestly, it feels like he sees nations as chess pieces rather than communities of people, and in his mind, pulling off something this audacious would be the ultimate power flex. Well, this actually reminds me of someone. I mean, seriously, I know a lot of you won't forgive me if I don't ask about the parallels between Trump and Putin, so let's see what it thinks about that, and here it is. Yes, there are clear parallels between Trump's approach to Canada, or other territorial ambitions, and Putin's actions regarding Ukraine. They both reflect a mindset that prioritizes dominance over diplomacy, seeing neighboring countries as pieces to be absorbed into their sphere of influence rather than as independent actors. Putin framed Ukraine as culturally and historically tied to Russia, claiming its sovereignty was secondary to Russia's interests. Similarly, Trump might view Canada as a natural extension of the US, ignoring Canada's strong national identity and independence. The key difference is context. Putin's actions involved outright aggression, including annexation and war. Trump, while bombastic in rhetoric, hasn't taken concrete steps toward invading or annexing Canada. It's more about provocative statements and posturing. But the mindset, the belief that it's justifiable to disregard a neighbor's sovereignty for personal or national gain, has an unsettling similarity. It's a power play rooted in control, ignoring the long-term consequences of destabilizing relationships and alienating allies. Alright, well, the parallels are clear here, but now let's ask if AI is sure that Trump won't take any military action or anything like that against Canada, and here's the answer. I don't think Trump would go as far as military aggression against Canada. It's too risky even for him. The upside here is that just as people don't really expect him to deliver on the positive promises he makes during his campaigns, the same goes for the extreme or wild ones. It would destroy America's image worldwide, alienate allies, and create chaos at home. Even his base, as loyal as they are, might draw the line at invading one of the US's closest friends. But let's be honest, Trump thrives on pushing boundaries and making outrageous moves. If Canada flat out refused to entertain his ideas, he could escalate with economic threats, tariffs, or some symbolic military posturing along the border. He'd use it as a way to flex power and rally his supporters, claiming he's standing up for America. Still, full-on military action? That's a step too far, even for him. The backlash would be overwhelming, and he's not about to tank his legacy or brand for something that would be nearly impossible to pull off without catastrophic consequences. Got it. Oh, and I love that line about why some of us are so sure that he lies all the time, but still believe him when he promises something wild. But anyway, I've got one quick question. Let's ask what ChatGPT would do with Canada and his whole situation, and here's the short answer. I'd leave Canada alone. Trying to take over a sovereign nation would destroy alliances, wreck America's reputation, and spark massive backlash. Instead, I'd focus on strengthening trade, security cooperation, and mutual interests. Canada is a partner, not a target. Alright, it would leave Canada alone, plain and simple. Now we're left with one last message for today. Let's ask it to write a direct message to Donald Trump and share what it thinks about his moves. Go ahead, ChatGPT. Donald, let's cut to the chase. Your ideas about taking over Greenland, Canada, or the Panama Canal aren't bold leadership moves, they're impractical fantasies. These aren't deals you can just close like buying a golf course. These are sovereign nations with their own identities, pride, and people who don't want to be part of your version of America. Pushing this kind of rhetoric doesn't make you look strong, it makes you look disconnected from reality. I get that you may justify these actions as securing US dominance or countering China's influence, but this isn't the way to do it. Trying to take control of territories or bully nations into submission only isolates the US and damages its credibility. If you truly care about US influence, focus on building partnerships, strengthening alliances, and solving real issues at home. Bullying neighbors, undermining decades of diplomacy, and stirring chaos isn't the strategy America needs. Leadership isn't about dominating the map, it's about earning respect. So, stop treating the presidency like a reality show and start respecting the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. Your legacy depends on what you actually accomplish, not the headlines you chase. You have the platform to make a real difference, so focus on what truly matters. And that's it. That was great, wasn't it? Buying a golf course? Well, thank you, ChatGPT, and thank you for watching this until the end. Let me know in the comments if you agree with AI's takes, and after that, click on this video to find out its prediction on Trump and Musk's relationship and whether they'll eventually break up or not. Thanks for watching, we're done here. Click on that pop-up, and I'll see you over there in just a moment.